Welcome everybody! With Like a Dragon Ishin getting closer and closer to its worldwide release date, I figured it's time we make another one of these combat guides to try and get you up to speed on things that you may want to know going into the game's combat, especially since this game's combat is a bit unique compared to other games and has things that other games don't. And I don't know about the remake yet, but the original Ishin can get pretty punishing the more you progress with the story. And it's a safe assumption looking at the gameplay of the remake that the core gameplay will probably be exactly the same. For this video, I'll be using footage of the original Ishin because the remake still hasn't come out yet. The two versions play out almost exactly the same minus the card system, which we'll get into later on. This guide will assume you use either a PlayStation or an Xbox controller, but if you use a keyboard and mouse, then don't worry. I'll try to use terms that should roughly be the same as those that you'll find in your combat settings in the game, so you can still follow through just fine. This guide, more than anything, is intended for people that never or barely touched any Yakuza game. So before that one person out there goes, "Excuse me, Mr. Devilion7, this guide is so fucking easy and pointless, why did you make this?" Let me drop a surprise bomb for you. You're not the only person out there playing this game. I know, crazy, shocking even, but it is the truth.
Arrogant motherfucker.
And if you're one of those people that know like 99% of what we're gonna talk about, but you still choose to join and watch this video for the company, and because you enjoy watching the channel's content, then thank you. You're the reason why I continue to make content. Now, having said that, let's get into the guide. We'll kick off the guide with the most basic things you need to know. Dodging, blocking, locking on, and counters. These are things you're already taught going into the game right at the beginning, but it is important to stress that they do exist, because from time to time I see people who genuinely think that they don't exist in these games, when they very much do. And it's not a bad idea to give a reminder regardless, because sometimes in the heat of the fight, even someone who's used to these games may forget to use them. Take it from me, I've been playing since game 1, and I forget about some moves all the time. You should have every one of those things we mentioned from the get-go, minus maybe the counters, which in most Yakuza or Like a Dragon games, you have to learn those from certain NPCs. So make sure you take the time to do some side content to meet said NPCs if you want extra abilities that could really help you in a jiffy. To give you an extra incentive to learn those counters, one of the best and most infamous counters in the series, the Taiga drop, known for its ridiculous overpowered nature, is available in Ishin. Anyway, let's start with locking on. You can lock onto a single enemy with R1 or RB. This is pretty handy with bosses or just any single enemy that you want to focus on. Then there's dodging, which can be done with X for PlayStation or A for Xbox. And blocking is done with L1 or LB. You can dodge and block while locking onto an enemy as well. Blocking should be miles easier when you lock onto the enemy since you don't have to worry about manually getting the direction right. There's only one style in the game where you can't block in, and that's the wild dance style. Not sure if that's gonna be the official name for the style, but basically that is the gun and sword style. So you'll have to rely more on being quick on your feet in that style. With the basics out of the way, let's move on to the fighting styles of the game. To make things easier for everyone, I'll be teaching you these moves assuming you have no skills unlocked. And then whenever you unlock new moves, make sure to read up on what they do. We'll start small with the hand-to-hand fighting style. The unarmed fighting style in this game is surprisingly viable, but it depends on your situation. Usually in crowds you'll have a hard time, but for one-on-one encounters, if you really want to flex on your opponent like that, you should be able to make use of it just fine. Now let's talk about the rush combo of this style. For context, for newcomers, a rush combo is the basic string of attacks in any given style. The unarmed style has 4 rush combos in total. Light attack, then heavy attack, light attack twice and then heavy attack, light attack 3 times and then heavy attack, and the last one, which you can unlock very early on, is light attack 4 times and then heavy attack. Very simple and straightforward. Usually you don't want to use the heavy attack by itself because it barely does anything. You're also able to grab enemies with circle or B. Now pay attention. When grabbing, you have 3 options. Press the grab button again to throw the enemy, or press the heavy attack button to send the enemy flying, or you can do light attack 3 times for a combo. Though the light attack option is not the best in this case. Usually what you want to do here is either throw or use heavy attack, because with the light attack option they can break free easily. It's also worth mentioning that when throwing, you can control the direction while it's happening, and also if you're close enough to a wall, you can throw an enemy into the wall. Obviously you can't block swords or guns in this style. What you can do though is parry attacks, and that does include sword attacks. You can do this without any upgrades, but the time window is very small and it's very tricky to pull off, but it is still possible. What you have to do is press the block button right as the enemy attacks, and you'll parry their attack like this. Those were some of the things that you should keep in mind with the unarmed style. Now let's kick it up a notch with the next style, the sword style. This one essentially works very similar to the unarmed style with its button inputs, but there's a couple of things that sets it apart. Let's talk about the similarities. This style's rush combo inputs are the same. There's light attack and then heavy attack, light attack twice and then heavy attack, light attack 3 times and then heavy attack, and finally, similar to the unarmed style, with the extension at the beginning of the sword skill tree unlocked, light attack 4 times and then heavy attack. Much like the unarmed style, you don't really want to use the base heavy attack by itself. One thing to note about the rush combos of this style that the unarmed style doesn't have is that you can charge the heavy attacks by holding the heavy attack button after you're done inputting the light attacks. So this is how it will look like. 1 light attack and a charged heavy attack. This is a decent move because it has a good sweep for crowds. 2 light attacks and then a charged attack. I don't recommend this move because it leaves you open to attacks if there's multiple enemies. 3 light attacks and then a charged heavy attack, which could be useful depending on the situation, such as when an enemy is getting up and you're fast enough to land it before they fully get up. And finally, 4 light attacks and a charged heavy attack. There's one skill I heavily recommend getting as soon as you can, which thankfully happens to be around the beginning of the sword skill tree as well, and that is the ability that allows you to press heavy attack again after a 4 light attack, 1 charged heavy attack rush combo. This version of the string deals heavy damage if you manage to land all of it on an enemy, and it can be very handy against the bosses as well. I'd argue it's the best combo with this style against a single enemy. Much like how the unarmed style has a parry by blocking at the right time, the sword style allows you to knock back an enemy when you block right as their attack lands on you. You're also able to block bullets with this style by default. You may be wondering what the grab button does for this style. Good question. It has you do this move that is intended to break the guards of enemies. This comes in handy the most when you face boss type enemies. Successfully breaking the guard of one guarantees that the next rush combo that you do will land 100%, even if it's a charged one. So for example, if you break an enemy's guard with this, you'll be able to pull off 4 light attacks, a charged heavy attack, and then a heavy attack for major damage, without worrying about them blocking again for this duration, assuming you unlocked this combo, as we've already spoken about that earlier. Though any other combo works after a guard break, really. Also, with bosses in particular, it's not a bad idea to land 1 or 2 light attacks, dodge, guard break, and repeat from time to time. You want to try to be slow and steady when you can, especially later on where they'll deal a lot of damage to you. With the key points of the sword style discussed, let's go to one of the more anticipated styles in the game. The Wild Dance style, aka the sword and gun style. This style is all about mobility and crowd control. You move and attack the fastest with it, but it's not the best when it comes to defense, as you're completely unable to block with it as far as my knowledge goes, so you have to rely on your quick movement and dodges. The rush combo of this style is a little different. For starters, you don't have a heavy attack finisher to your light attacks, or at least not in the typical sense as we've come to expect from the previous 2 styles. All the heavy attack button does in this style is it'll shoot your gun, and that can link with your light attacks, but it feels kind of anticlimactic. Instead, you usually want to use the light attack button with the grab button in this style to chain your attacks more smoothly. Let's go over the light attack string. By default, you're able to press light attack up to 4 times and it will look like this. Once you unlock the extension, you can press light attack up to 5 times. Now let's talk about the grab button for this style. Pressing the grab button up to 3 times will result in this combo. Of course, when you're playing, you don't usually count it like this. You just press the button until you see Ryoma going pew 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 pew. That's when you know you did the extent of this combo. You'll be able to chain the light attack button with the grab button. You can press any amount of light attacks you want, and then you can just end it with the grab button combo. Also, small tidbit, you can shoot back in this style by pressing the heavy attack button while holding the direction behind you. And that's really all about it for the gist of this style. Alright, it's time for the best style. Motherfucking gun. To be honest with you all, this is the one style I probably know the least about. I don't think it has much more to it than pew 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 and a bit more pew pew pew. Okay, jokes aside, light attacks will just keep shooting the gun at your enemy. And yes, the ammo is infinite. This isn't too bad for when you're sick of street encounters and you just want a brain-dead solution. Though honestly, from personal experience, I think using the sword style's charged attacks might be a quicker way to get rid of the encounters, at least in the beginning. The heavy attack button will shoot a special kind of bullet that is slower to shoot, does more damage, and is also finite, so you gotta watch the ammo for this one. These special bullets can have different effects depending on the type, like having a chance of burning enemies. You can also grab in this style, though pressing light attack and heavy attack will result in the same outcome, and pressing the grab button again will look like this. Nothing really too impressive. I did forget to mention, this style has one rush combo. Insane, I know. Pressing heavy attack after pressing light attack will make you do this move. And that's really all I can tell you about this style for the time being. You'll have to experiment more once you get your hands on the game. We've now covered all the styles that the game has to offer. It's time to talk about something important that is shared in all of them. Heat actions. Heat actions are a staple of the Yakuza or Like a Dragon games. They're basically powerful finishers that look fancy and usually deal a lot of damage. I don't know about how the remake will handle them, but in the original, heat actions kinda suck on bosses. Because once you use one heat action on them, every other heat action after that will deal like no damage, even if it's not a repeat of one you already did. This isn't a concern with normal enemies though, as they'll continue to do great damage. Before you can do one, you need to make sure your heat bar is filled up until it glows first. There's a lot of different moves that have different conditions and a lot of ones you'll have to unlock, but to give you some basic ones that you should have from the get-go, grabbing an enemy in the unarmed style and taking them to a wall will give you this prompt, letting you know that you can perform a heat action. Press the button and boom, enemy destroyed. Another one you should be able to do from the get-go is when you have an enemy on the floor with your heat bar filled up, you'll be able to do something like this. Here's an important piece of info that works for most Yakuza games past Yakuza 4. Holding L2 or left trigger will disable heat actions. This is very useful in case you want to do a certain move that involves the heavy attack button without being forced to do said heat action. For example, I want to stomp on this enemy on the ground without doing a heat action to conserve my heat. All I have to do is hold L2 and then I can press the heavy attack button to stomp them without issues. You should have a good idea of how heat actions work now. So we'll talk about your weapons. You can upgrade your weapons or craft new ones at the blacksmith. You'll meet him as you play through the story normally, so you can't miss it. It's a good idea to take the time to craft better weapons, because if you continue the game with starter weapons, you'll have hell to deal with by the end of the game. Lastly, we'll go over the card system real quick. Now this is something that was only available in a specific game mode in the original, the dungeon battles to be precise. The remake seems to be integrating the system in the main combat. As far as I can tell, they work the same way. You hold L2 and you pick the card that you want to use. These cards will have different effects, and I'm not sure how exactly you'll get your hands on them in the remake, but I'm sure most of you will find their way around them. On a closing note, with the implementation of these cards in the main combat in the remake, I do wonder if they rebalanced the core combat or if it's the exact same, just with these cards now there to help give you an extra hand. Because if it's the former, well, shit, I think this guy is fucked. Though honestly, I don't think it'll be that drastic, because looking at the gameplay videos of the remake does give me the impression that the core combat will be the same, and you don't need the cards to progress. And that's it, folks. Whether or not you're new to the game or the series, thank you so much for watching this. I hope it'll give you an edge going into the game. And if it helped you learn something you didn't know before, then I'm even more glad to have made this video. I'd like to give a special thanks to all my Hannya members, who I'm always grateful for their constant support for the channel. You guys are the best, and I can't thank you enough for continuing to be there for me. With that being said, I hope everyone will have a great time with Like a Dragon Ishin, and I'll see you when I stream this game day 1. Bye bye.